Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call this special school board meeting of September 8, 2015 to order. The time is 5:06 p.m. The purpose of today's meeting is to hold a public hearing to consider the adoption of the 2015-2016 final millage rates and the 2015-2016 final budget. At this time, we request that all cellular telephones be turned off or put in the silent mode. I would like to take this opportunity to remind the members of the public of the district's mission, which is to ensure that each student reaches his or her highest personal potential and the district's vision to be a world-class school system. Today's agenda includes presentation on the percent of increase over rollback rate, proposed millages, budget overview, proposed final budget, public hearing on the final budget, adoption of the required local effort millage, basic discretionary millage, capital outlay millage, resolution determining revenues and millages, fiscal year 16 final budget and related resolution adopting the final budget. Comments from board members, superintendent, and board attorney. Board members, is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Fisher, seconded by Ms. La Riviere. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes 4-0. I will now turn the meeting over to Dr. Graham, Superintendent, and Dr. Desimore, Assistant Superintendent, Business and Finance.
And I will quickly turn it over to Dr. Desimore. Some of this information you've already heard. Review is a good teacher, and so Dr. Desimore will review, and then I'll make my final recommendations.
Okay. All right. Good evening, Dr. Graham, members of the board. This hearing is the second of two public hearings that are required under Florida statutes to provide the public an opportunity to give input into the proposed millage levy and the budget for this fiscal year. The superintendent submitted her proposed tentative budget to the board on July 23. The tentative hearing was advertised in the news press on Friday, July 24, and the first public hearing that we held was here on July 28 to discuss and adopt the tentative millage and tentative budget. On Tuesday, September 1st, you received information on the final budget for the 2015-16 year. The second and final public hearing that we are having now was noticed through a direct mailing from the property appraiser's office. This mail document is known as the TRIM, or the Truth in Millage Notice, and was sent as is required by law. Now, as outlined in the TRIM requirements, the first thing we must do is discuss the millage rollback rate. So basically, the rollback rate is that millage which, when applied to the current year's tax roll, net of any adjustments for new growth, would produce the same dollars as received in the previous year. So this year, our calculated rollback rate is 6.9977, or 6.998 rounded. We're actually levying 7.285 mills, which is an increase of 4.11%, over the rollback rate. I would point out that the required local effort part of this millage is required by the state in order to receive any other state funding, and that's 69% of the total millage that we're proposing to levy today. The proposed millage rate for 2015-16, again, is 7.285, which is actually a decrease of 0.131 mills from the previous millage rate of 7.416 from the previous fiscal year. The new millage rate will generate $26.5 million more than the previous year because of our increase in the tax roll, which is a little over 7% this year. So as we look at what our millage rate was in comparison, remember, based on the way they calculate the required local effort at the state, in general, when the tax roll goes up, you will see the millage rate come down. And so that's where you see within the past 2 years, in 2015, we did see a decrease in the millage rate, and then again in 2016, because those have been our two most current years, and the tax roll has increased in each of those years. And that's referenced or illustrated here in 2014 to 15, and then 15 to 16, you see that tax roll now steadily increasing. A good indicator of what's going on with the economy, but again, it has an opposite effect on the millage rate. So then when we take a look here on what the actual effect is on taxpayers, what we have here is an illustration of what happens. On average, the tax roll increased 7.3%. Now, of course, what an individual's property does is really individualized related to the property, but on average, the tax will increase 7.3%. So if we look at what that increase would do to a taxpayer, if the old value of your home was $100,000 and you increase that 7.3%, then the new value is $107,300. So based on last year's tax rate and this year's proposed tax rate, the difference that that taxpayer would see in their property taxes for the school district would be $43.36. And we've done that illustration for $150,000 and $200,000 house as well, the largest increase in that scenario being a little over $80. And then we also show what happens when the property value increases 3%. We know that we're familiar with the Save Our Homes amendment, so that there are some taxpayers when they're homesteaded that their values won't increase any more than 3%. So under those scenarios, you see what the effect would be on those individual taxpayers. At a $200,000 home that's moving up to $206,000 this year, the effect would be a little less than $21 for school district taxes this year. Now, the proposed total millage levy is as followed. Remember, I said we have that millage broken out into several different pieces. The required local effort, which is the largest piece of the millage, 69% of it at 5.037, with the proposed amount to be raised of $334,277,552. Basic discretionary millage of 0.748, with a proposed amount to be raised of $49,640,582, and capital outlay at 1.5 mils, with a proposed amount to be raised of $99,546,622. So that's your total millage of 7.285. Altogether, the proposed amount to be raised, $483,464,756. The final budget, as you have in front of you, totals $1,337,896,197, broken out into each of the different funds as you see in front of you. So what we'll do is we'll take a little bit of time just to talk about each of those different funds and highlight several things within each of them. For your audience today, we know that the budget, it has several funds in it, and they're earmarked for different things. Of course, the general fund is the major operating fund of the district, used to pay almost all of the operating expenses of the district, and the major water carrier as far as what happens with salaries and other operations in the district. We've got the debt service fund, which is used exclusively to pay debt of the school district, principal and interest. We have the capital fund, which is used to build schools, maintenance for all of our existing schools, and to buy equipment. We have our food service fund, which supports the food program, breakfast and lunch for all students, and is self-supporting. We've got our special revenue funds, which are federal funds that must be used for the specific purpose that is written in the grant. And we have our internal service fund, which accounts for the insurance costs of the district, both health insurance and property and casualty. So let's take a look at each one of these funds, and like I said, just highlight a few things in them to go over what is contained in the final budget. So as I said earlier, our general fund is the major source of revenue for the district operation. At this point, it is budgeted at $830 million, and that's 62% of our total budget. And we are estimating that we will have over 90,000 students this school year. So let's look at that breakdown by the numbers, because the FEFP in our general fund is the Florida Education Finance Program is the major source of revenue within our general fund, and that is the mechanism by which the state funds school districts. So when we look at what we received in the FEFP this year, we're looking at $656.6 million in total revenue that we'll receive, or that we are budgeted at this point to receive this year. That's almost a $28 million increase from the previous year. Sounds hefty, but remember, we're looking at over a 2% increase in our student population as well. So we did expect some increase there. It does equate to a 2.3% increase in per pupil funding, so that is a good thing. Any increase is appreciated and much needed. It breaks down to about $7,284 per FTE. And so the base student allocation this year is about $4,154. So that is, again, an increase that we did expect because of our growth, but we were happy to see that there was some additional funding put into that FEFP this year. But again, we're looking for the state to come back to the amounts that we were getting per FTE in 2008, and we're still about $200 short of that. So that rebuilding process is it's in process, but we haven't gotten to the top of the mountain yet. As I mentioned earlier, a 7.29% increase in the tax roll. So that is a good indicator of what's happening in the economy. And as far as the FEFP is concerned, we get a total dollar value, the $656.6 million that I mentioned. Part of that comes from state revenues and part of that comes from local in terms of property taxes. 42% of the $656 million is coming from state. The rest of it is funded by our property tax dollars. So when we look at the sources of operating revenues, and we're talking all operating revenues now, not just the FEFP, even though that's the major source of operating revenue, but everything we've got coming in, we're looking at about 58% of that coming from local sources, another 41% coming from state, and a very small sliver, less than 1%, really coming from federal funds. Remember, this is the operating fund only. The rest of the federal funds you'll find in a different fund. So as far as where that money goes, you see the breakdown here. Important to note, though, that at this point, over 70% of the funds that we have in the general fund are budgeted towards instruction or direct school expenses. And so that is what we always shoot for, and we think what the board expects to see within our operating budget. And then we have another 12% that's going towards operations and maintenance, which again directly support what it is that schools are trying to do and the things that we're trying to maintain for all of our school facilities. So a very large portion of our budget goes to the direct support of schools or the support and maintenance of the facilities that they operate in. As I go on to the food service budget, that is currently at $63.7 million, which is the final budget package that we're asking you to approve tonight. That budget does include breakfast for every child at no additional cost to our parents, and the lunch prices that we had last year remain the same for this year. And just as a note to remind everyone that we do have the new community eligibility program that went into effect this year inside of most of our schools in the district. So that is something that we're keeping an eye on and monitoring and making sure that the plan goes as we expect it to. As far as our special revenue funds are concerned, some of the major sources of revenue within special revenue, Title I and IDEA and our TIF grant. That final budget for our special revenue fund is at $64.1 million. We do expect that budget to grow over the year because as the year progresses, we will continue to be awarded some additional grants. So we do expect that number to go up. You all will see that number go up because you'll be approving the grants as they come in. Our capital funds, which is another budgeted fund that we've had a lot of conversation about. The current budget, as we're requesting to approve in the final, $190.5 million. At this point, our local property taxes are the sole source of substantial revenue within our capital funds. There's really nothing else there that is substantial. We do plan on taking on new debt for the South Zone High School that the board has approved. But at this point, we have to also create a plan for the other two schools that are needed within our 5-year window. So we'll have to have some continuing conversation about that. We'll continue to focus as much as we can with the dollars that we have available on maintenance, renovations, and technology within our schools. But as we discussed before, we do believe that another source of revenue is needed for this plan to remain viable. If we want to maintain our schools at the rate that we feel that they deserve, and if we want to build new facilities in a timely manner to prevent crowding of our facilities, we've got to figure out what that additional source of revenue and capital will be. And to go along with capital is the debt service fund, which that debt service fund gets all of its revenue from the capital funds. It's a transfer from capital into debt service to pay principal and interest in each year, which amount, the mortgage payment of the district amounts to about $42 million in each year. Now, as a rule, by statute, the district can pledge up to 75% of our property tax revenues that we receive in capital in order to pay principal and interest payments. We're nowhere near that 75% cap. We're at about 56% of that, so a little over half. However, as a board, you all have expressed the desire for us to really stay within a 50% limitation, to only pledge up to half of our property tax revenues on principal and interest payments, and we're at about 84% of that limit. So, but again, that number will change because as we take on additional debt, that percentage is going to change. I want to take a second to talk about our reserves because we know that that's an important conversation for the board. It protects the district's financial position, and we've got to make sure that we do have those funds put aside in case of emergency or things that that may occur that we need to make sure that we have the capability to take care of. So currently, there's two levels of reserves in the budget. First of all, the district is required to keep a level of 3% of new revenues in contingency. If we don't do that, then we'll have some additional monitoring from the state level at the DOE. So our contingency is set at $20 million, which is that 3%, and we're there. As far as additional reserves that we have budgeted, we have an additional reserve on top of that of $26 million, and those two pieces represent about 6.7% of our current revenue. So, as a wrap, our district budget supports our 121 schools this year, over 90,000 students, and we do believe that will easily hit that projection. They keep coming in every day. Supports the initiatives of the state, supports the district's vision and mission, and is centered on student achievement and the district's strategic plan. So we submit this budget in support of our mission, the students and employees of the school district of Lee County, as well as the citizens of Lee County, and we ask that the board adopt the final budget as presented tonight.
Dr. Graham, at this time, I would ask that you present your recommendations for this evening's public hearing items.
Recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the 2015-16 final proposed required local effort millage of 5.037 mils with a proposed amount to be raised of $334,277,552. The required local effort includes basic required local effort of 5.019 and a prior period adjustment millage of 0.018. Recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the 2015-16 final proposed basic discretionary millage of 0.748 mils with a proposed amount to be raised of $49,640,582. Recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the 2015-16 final proposed capital outlay millage of 1.500 with a proposed amount to be raised of $99,546,622. The total millage will equal 7.285 mils with a total amount to be raised of $483,464,756. The total millage rate to be levied exceeds the rollback rate. It is an increase in the rollback rate of 4.11%. Recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the resolution determining revenues and millages levied and the resolution adopting the final millage rates for the fiscal year 2015-16. Recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the final budget and related resolution adopting the final budget for the 2015-16 school year as follows. General operating in the amount of $829,970,455. Special revenue budget in the amount of $127,788,348. Debt service budget in the amount of $49,819,988. Capital outlay budget in the amount of $190,494,855. Internal service budget in the amount of $139,822,551. The total final budget, $1,337,896,197.
Okay, we will now recess this special school board meeting and open the public hearing to consider the adoption of the final millage rates, final budget for 2015-16. At this time, the public will be invited to speak for 3 minutes on these matters alone. The time allowed is 3 minutes per speaker. Is there anyone on the right side of the auditorium who wishes to address the board? Anyone on the left side? Mr. Fox. Oh, I'm sorry, and Mr. Amos? Okay.
And once again, it's all about the debt. This board needs to act immediately to tackle the debt, free up $51 million each year. You can do it by a half-cent sales tax and a 1.0 debt reduction, debt elimination millage, concurrently at the same time go on the 2016 ballot for free. That, if we achieve that, this district in 4 years can retire its debt and free up $51 million. Now, Ms. Dozier, you and Mr. Toiber were on this board when Mr. Browder borrowed a whole bunch of money, $100 million, and you let him defer that money for 10 years. You guys owe it to this district, to everybody who works in this district, who's dealing with the debt and the problems it's causing. You too owe it to this district to get behind the sales tax initiative and vote this thing in and go out there in the public and fight for the students and the people who work in this district. Time has come. Mishandled the finances of this district in the worst way possible. And you sit up there and you won't move. You say publicly, oh, I want the sales tax. Well, you got to go out there and fight for it. That's what being on this board is all about. It's not conveying some conservative ideal that you can cut your way to prosperity. Okay? These kids need the money. It's costing them big, big money. It's made it hard for the superintendent, every teacher in this district, every personnel that works here, every school bus driver, everybody. The debt is a big problem, and let's do something about it. You're not going to get help from the state. You're not going to get help from the county commissioners. You're nobody but yourself. You're on this board. That's what you're here for, to fight for the kids and to get the money in this district that the kids need. Enough is enough. All right? This budget is, 10 years ago you had $1.5 billion. Now you have 1.3, 10,000 more students, and a whole bunch more debt than you had back then. The situation was great. The economy was roaring, and you fumbled the football. Time to pick it up and run towards the right goal line. Thank you.
Mr. Amos.
Good afternoon. My name's Leo Amos. I live in Matlacha. I've watched the school district for probably ever since I retired 23 years ago. I've seen the ups and downs go. There's some questions I have, and one is on the certificates of participation. Just how much more are we paying on certificates of participation versus borrowing funds? Anybody got any idea? I mean, there has to be, I'm sorry, I'm talking to you, but, I expect an answer, and maybe you don't, maybe you've never looked at it, but one of the things that come in my mind when I read that was the certificate of deposit or certificate of participation is probably costing you more money than what the bond market would. Now would be an excellent time to look at doing something different, and that would be going to bonds. I totally disagree with the last gentleman's statement because of the fact that schools are built to last 30 years. There's no reason for one generation to pay for something that's going to last 30 years. That's the reason why you borrow the money. Now, it may seem like a waste to some people, but what we want to do is we want to have people pay for things as it's used. So consequently, if you don't borrow the funds, that's a waste of taxpayer money as well, because we can't afford it. I mean, I've been retired for 23 years now. It's great for young people coming in saying, hey, let's pay this off, pay that off. But that's not the way life works. Also, I'd like to talk about the residual, reserve. I seen that it was like 52 million, but according to what I'm reading, it's down here, it's $221 million in reserve. If someone could tell me why that's $221 million versus the $52 million I just heard there, I'd appreciate that as well. I know I wrote a letter about Vice President Biden. I mean, you know, this guy is just wonderful. He can run 2 years of college for $333 a year. I find that fantastic, and I wish our superintendent could do the same. Thank you very much.
I will now close the public hearing and reconvene the special school board meeting of September 8th, 2015. The board will now consider each of the superintendent's recommendations. Dr. Graham, would you please, Mrs. Dozier?
Well, I would ask that before we do that, you have someone answer this gentleman's questions. Evidently, he doesn't understand that we don't talk to people as they're speaking, and this is my first time seeing him up here, so it might behoove us to have someone answer his questions.
Mrs. Morgan, my plan was that Dr. Desamore would go speak with Mr. Amos personally,
Okay.
get his questions answered.
Thank you.
Recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the 2015-16 final proposed required local effort millage of 5.037 mils with a proposed amount to be raised of $334,277,552. The RLE includes the basic required local effort of 5.019 and a prior period adjustment millage of .018.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Fisher, seconded by Ms. LaRiviere. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
Recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the 2015-16 final proposed basic discretionary millage of .748 mils with a proposed amount to be raised of $49,640,582.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Dozier, seconded by Ms. LaRiviere. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0.
Recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the 2015-16 final proposed capital outlay millage of 1.500 with a proposed amount to be raised of $99,546,622. The total millage will equal 7.285 mils with a total amount to be raised of $483,464,756. The total millage rate to be levied exceeds the rollback rate. It is an increase in the rollback rate of 4.11%.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Fisher, seconded by Ms. LaRiviere. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
Recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the resolution determining revenues and millages levied and the resolution adopting the final millage rates for the fiscal year 2015-16.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Dozier, seconded by Ms. LaRiviere. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
Recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the final budget and related resolution adopting the final budget for the 2015-16 school year as follows. General operating in the amount of $829,970,455. Special revenue budget in the amount of $127,788,348. Debt service budget in the amount of $49,819,988. Capital outlay budget in the amount of $190,494,855. Internal service budget in the amount of $139,822,551. The total final budget, $1,337,896,197.
Board members, you have heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Fisher, seconded by Mrs. Dozier. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Board member, board attorney, and superintendent comments. We'll start with Ms. Fisher.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank the superintendent, Dr. Desamore, and the team for educating us along the way all through the year on the impending budget. I do want to comment that in the face of all the growth, we are still at 1.3 billion, and we have not grown commensurate with the growth in our population. We do have a capital crisis, and we're aware of that. Our local dollars are paying for 58% of the budget. We know that we have a big debt service, and that amounts to nearly $50 million a year. So I do look forward to entertaining a new source of revenue and letting the voters decide whether or not the community wants to help us bear the brunt of that, reduce the debt, and also fund our growth as we go on. But I do support the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Dozier.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I too would like to thank the superintendent and Dr. Desamore for bringing us a budget that is balanced, and it's not what we would like for it to be, but as we know that some of our millage rates are actually set by the legislature, and we also spend an extensive amount of time during the year to actually go over all of this, and it's not something we take lightly. So when each one of these recommendations were brought forward, if you didn't hear any discussion, it's because we have probably hammered out just about all the discussion we can during the year. So with that being said, I think this is the best budget that we could have at this time, and hopefully we'll have a good year with it.
Thank you. Mrs. LaRiviere.
I too, along with everyone, want to thank Dr. Desamore, Dr. Graham, assistant superintendents, everybody in the budget team who worked together to bring this forward. We're wishing it could be different. We just need some legislators to make some changes in how they view things. And we just hope that they won't contact us later on in the year and say, oh, we need some of this money back. So we hope we get all that we've been promised this year.
And I guess my comment would be that, again, to Dr. Desamore and her staff, this has been a very challenging year for you all. And I know you have worked really, really, really hard to put something together that the community can support and we can support. And we still have our challenges, but you've done an awful lot of work to help us move forward with those challenges. And so thank you again for everything you do. Mr. Martin.
Nothing this time, thank you.
Dr. Graham.
Dr. Desamore, Mr. Amos, Dr. Desamore is our Assistant Superintendent over the budget. She'll come see you and answer your questions so you get specific answers. If you'll take care of that, I'd appreciate it. That's it.
Okay. At this point, having no other business to come before this body, this meeting is adjourned at 5:38 p.m.